Why do you think heart disease is the #1 killer in America?
Great question. I love this one because this is something that I often proselytize on in my lectures. I rant and rave about this one all the time, and it's the subject of heart disease. So a lot of people think that cancer is the #1 diabetes too. Diabetes and cancer, a lot of times people think that those are the top epidemics, and those are major ones, but the #1 epidemic in the world health-wise is still heart disease. And I have two fundamental perspectives on this. One is the obviousness of the whole cardiovascular system, the physical frame. Basically, for generations on end, we've loaded ourselves up with all the clogging agents that clog up our capillaries, that literally break down the outer and inner surface of our capillary tunnels that are transporting red blood cells and oxygen all throughout the vascular system, that gets oxygen and blood flow in and out of the heart and through the rest of the body, right? So one of the things is, structurally speaking, at the capillary and vein and artery level, there's a breakdown. There's something what we call calcification, where the structure of the veins are all being calcified. And so the structure actually breaks down and it submerges, meaning that it constricts and it blocks off the flow of blood, and then blood actually gets backed up in the vascular system. Then we see things like diabetes type 2 take form. We see diabesity, which is a term to explain obesity and diabetes together, because they're interweaving together, right? So from that perspective, heart disease, you can kind of see where that goes, right? But then on the other end is just the emotional, the psychosomatic level of it, is that when people are not living in their heart, they're more cyberzoic, which is the age of the mind. That's what it is. The cyberzoic age is the age of, it's a cerebral age basically, where we're stuck in our head. We're trying to figure everything out. We're calculation based. We're trying to figure out mathematics based on linear dynamics. So if you've ever read the book Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins, he talks about the power of non-linear dynamics, meaning that you can't quantify the natural rhythms of life. You can't just break it down into a box and say, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you study the Fibonacci sequence, which is like sacred geometry, the way nature is patterned, it goes 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, so on and so forth. What does all that have to do with anything? Well, what it ultimately has to do with is that our brains and our psychology in our society is so wired towards the abacus mind, towards trying to figure everything out. What that does on a physiological and cardiovascular level is it constricts us, right? It's like a straitjacket, is that if you live your life always trying to work things out, always trying to figure things out, basically living in a certainty or scarcity type of reality, you're always like this, right? We might call that the fight or flight syndrome, or a cortisol-induced syndrome. Basically, you're in a fear state. When you're in a fear state, it's been shown empirically that your immune system shuts down almost automatically. Because what ends up happening is that when you're in a fight or flight state, your physiology and your ancestral lineage from all the ancestors from millennia that used to have to run away from wolves or bears or lions or whatever it is, they would shoot a fight or flight response because they were in a survival state. But that would last maybe 10 to 30 seconds. Now people are so stressed out that if they lose their keys, or they lock themselves out of a car, or they stub their toe or something, they're signaling the exact same response, and all the blood flow in your body that would go to your autonomic function, your automatic involuntary functions of your nervous system, like digestion, like elimination, number of other things that are basically your body does automatically. all that blood flow gets shut off, it stops going to your immune system, and all your life force potential gets allocated towards physiological survival. Hopefully that makes sense. So basically what's ended up happening is that if you keep this up, you basically constrict your heart, right? All the blood flow that would go to your heart gets constricted, it gets blocked up, and now 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, someone has a heart attack, right? What's that about? Obviously, there's a big connection with the plaque formations, calcium-forming organisms, tap water, all the saturated, cooked animal fats, trans fats, rancid fatty oils, and so on and so forth, right? That's all out there in the conversation. But also is this conversation about when you do what you love to do, you start to cause an easing of the system. Your body actually goes more into a parasympathetic state. It becomes more relaxed. Your libido rises. Ultimately, everything that would normally happen in perfect harmony, physiologically speaking, starts to kick back on. So this really has to do with the state of being stressed out or being relaxed, meaning being in the flow, right? Being in the flow has a lot to do with blood flow. So any activity that's prolonged in the human experience that cuts off the flow of blood or cuts us out of the universal flow of what's happening in our life is going to create physiological disturbance.